So we are going to have a look at some of the Fitzpatrick exercise for exercise 6.6, and I'm going to start with question 5a. Okay? Alright, so if I want to solve this equation, basically what the question is asking to find is find all the possible angles for theta between 0 to 360 degrees, okay, in radians. The first thing that you want to do is press shift sign 1 over root 2, not including the minus, because we want to know what angle you want to work with, and make sure your calculator is in degree mode, okay? So if I press shift sign 1 over root 2, I'm going to get 45 degrees, okay? Now, this is not part of your answer. This is the angle that you want to work with, okay? So using this angle, let's find all the angles where sine is negative, okay? In order to do that, we want to use ASTC quadrant as usual. So sine is negative in the third quadrant and the fourth quadrant. So using 45, if I want to find the angle in this quadrant, that would be 180 plus an extra 45 degrees, okay? So we want to find that angle where that's 45. So your first answer is 180 plus 45, which is 225 degrees. And like I said, sine is also negative in the cos quadrant. In order to find the angle there, it'll be all the way up until here, where 45 degrees is here. So all the angle up until there, that'll be 360, take away 45, which is 315 degrees, I believe. Yeah, okay. So those are your answers. And we want to also make sure we change these angles into radians, because the condition given to us is also in radians. That's very simple to do. Just put that angle over 180 and get the fraction down and just write pi next to it. Okay? Same thing for 315, divide by 180, I get 7 pi over 4. So those are your answers. And you could always check your answer by putting these angles back into the question. So if I put sine 225, I'm going to get minus 0.7, which is that. And same thing for sine 315, that's also that. Okay? Now let's have a look at these two questions, which is slightly different when you get the answers, and I'll show you why, but it's not hard. So same thing here. I want to find all the angles for x that's between 0 to 360. So the first thing that you want to do with this question is you want to bring that cos to the other side, bring it with the other cos. So we've got 3 is equal to 5 cos x, take away 2 cos x. Now 3 is equal to, because these are both like terms, I can just do 5 take away 2, that's 3 cos x. Now as you can see, I can divide both of them by 3, which will give me 1 equals to cos x, and mind you, this is a positive 1 right now. Now with this one, if I press shift cos 1, what you'll find is, so my answer for x, I get 0 degrees, okay? So if you get 0 degrees, you can't use ASTC sign to get the other possible angles. So what you do is you try out these set of possible angles if you get into a situation where you get 0 degrees. So here are the angles you want to try out. So 0, 90 degrees, 180, 270, and 360. Okay? Starting from 90 degrees, put it in here and see which of these angles gives you a value of 1. So that's how you get your answers when you get 0 degrees. So if you put in cos 90, I get 0. So that's not part of your answer, because what I want is 1. Next one, if I put in cos 180, I get minus 1. So that's not my answer either, because I want positive 1. If I put in cos 270, I get 0. So that's not your answer either. But if I put in cos 360, I get 1. So that's your other answer. Okay? So this is a unique one where you can't use ASTC. If you can't, these are the answers are here. You just got to try them out, starting from 90. Okay? Now let's try this problem out. Very similar problem. Okay? In this case, I've got tan squared x minus tan x. It's a quadratic equation, and if you see a quadratic form, you want to factorize it. So tan x is your common factor. So let's take tan x out. And then if I factorize it like this, I can get two equations to solve. So from here, tan x is equal to 0, and from here, tan x is equal to positive 1, okay? Because opposite of minus 1. Now with this one, if I press Shift 10, 0, I'm going to get 0. So this goes into this situation again. So let's try out all these numbers and see what else gives me value of 0. So if I put in now 10, 90, that gives me math error, so it's not 90. If I put in 10, 180, that gives me a 0. So that's girls mishearing that? Okay, so that's my other answer. Let's put in 10, 270. That's math error. If I put in 10, 360, that's also 0. So that's part of my answer. Okay? Now, with this one, if I press Shift 10, 1, I'm going to get, so my answer is 45 degrees. Now, if you get an answer where it's not 0 degrees, you use ASTC. Right now, I have positive 1. So 10 is also positive in the third quadrant here. And like I've explained, if I want the angle in this quadrant, and coincidentally, I've also got 45 here, so that's the same angle as 225 degrees like I said, 180 plus 45. So that's your other answer. So these are your answers, okay? So as your final answer, you would have to write them all. So in order would be preferable. So 45, 180, 225, and 360. Okay, so that's your answer. Let's have a look at this problem here. So usually whenever you have squared involved, you know you're going to get yourself into quadratic form. But in this case, I have sec and tan. They're two different trigonometric ratios. So I want to change the one with the squared in terms of tan. And I know this because if you recall, 1 plus tan squared theta is equal to sec squared theta. So this is something that you need to remember and use it in this type of situation. So basically you want to replace this with this. That gives me 1 plus tan squared theta, and bring the other one, minus 2 tan theta is equal to 0. Rearrange it so that you've got this term with the squared first, then the other one, and the constant plus 1 at the end. And if you can see, this is actually a quadratic equation. Think of this equation like seeing this equation. Okay? We've learned to factorize this type of equation. Using cross method, I can tell you right now, this is going to end up being x minus 1 squared equals to 0. So same thing, apply for that one. So in this one, it's going to be tan theta minus 1 squared equals to 0. And then from here, all you need to do is just solve inside the bracket. Tan theta is equal to opposite of minus 1 is plus 1. And we know the answer for tan is equal to plus 1. We've already done it here. Okay? And the answers were 45 and 225 degrees. Okay? So that's how you do this type of problem. Now, let's do a problem where you've got an equation where they want you to find that not between 0 to 360, but from minus 180 to 180, okay? And there's a little extra step that you got to do to this, but it's not hard, but you just got to make sure you do it. Firstly, you need to notice, we need to solve this, and they're in two different trig ratio again. So I want to change this one into terms of sine, because I know cosec is 1 over sine theta. Now that I've got sine on both sides, but I have a fraction on this side, I want to multiply both sides by sine theta, okay? Because that will now give me this. For sine squared theta is equal to 1, okay? So let's solve it from here. Let's divide it. So sine squared theta is equal to 1/4. And now you've got the square to get rid of by just square rooting it. If you square root 1 over 4, you get plus or minus half, okay? So you want to find all the angles for plus half and a minus a half. So let's have a look at it for just positive half. If I press shift sine half, I get 30 degrees, okay? And remember, you also want to get the angles where it's positive for sine using ASTC. And sine is positive in the second quadrant. So if it's in the second quadrant, it will be an angle up until here where 30 degrees is there. So the angle from here to there is 180 take away 30, which is 150, okay? That's all my possible angles. Now here's the extra little step you got to do when they ask you to find all the possible negative angles, okay? what you got to do to each of these angles is you got to also take away 360, because by you doing that, you're going backwards and finding out all the negative angles if you go one rotation backwards. Okay, so if I do 30 take away 360, I get minus 330. And if I do 150 take away 360, I get minus 210. Now, as you can see, these two values are out of minus 180 range, so you can just exclude these answers, but you've got to take away 360 to see if there are any possible answers that lie within that range. Okay, so far, these are my answers. Now let's check out my answers for negative half. Okay, so I'll do that in blue. Sine is negative in the tan and the cos quadrant. So I'll just do another ACC here. If I wanted to find the angle in this quadrant using 30, because remember if you shift sine half, it's 30, working with the angle 30. So the angle, if it was 30 there, all the way up until here, it will be 180 plus 30, that's 210. And the other one will be here. If I go all the way up until here, where that angle is 30, up until here, that'll be 360 take away 30, so I've got 330 degrees, okay? Now, once again, I have to take away 360 to both of these to find the negative angles. So if I do that, 210 take away 360, that's minus 150 degrees, and that is one of your answers because that does fall in between those numbers. And for this side, 330 take away 360, that's minus 30 degrees, okay? Which also does fall in the range. So my final answer is, if you realize my answers are 30 degrees, 150 degrees. Now 210 and 330, I exclude them in my final answer because these numbers are bigger than 180. It doesn't fall in between these two numbers. So my answers are basically these, okay? And you'll find 30, minus 30, 150, and minus 150. So it's just plus or minus 30 degrees and plus or minus 150 degrees, which also, by the way, needs to be written in radian form. Okay, so don't forget to do that. So my final answer is plus or minus pi over 6, and 150 degrees in radians is plus or minus 5 pi over 6. Okay, so those are my final answers. So that's how you do those problems, part 1.